Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
This Thursday. We're at the 16th of February. It would be officially almost at 4 weeks, almost at 1 month. And I think we can say that Trump has done more in 1 month than any president has ever done in all of history. All right, so this is
soon the world will know. Soon the world will know that Donald Trump is the man, and you will not deny that Donald Trump is the greatest president in living history.
I find this argument strange. I mean, literally, at this point of Obama's presidency, he signed a nearly $1 trillion stimulus bill that was the equivalent of like 50 bills in one. Like it or hate it, it was a significant bill, and done rather quickly. Why is there? I mean, if anyone has a mind meld with Trump Nation, it is you, Matt Lewis.
The world will see, and you will not deny that. Sorry, I'm still in my Stephen Miller speech mode.
I mean, I get that people voted for Trump. They meant it. They wanted disruption. They wanted a significant change in priority and in style. So that doesn't surprise me. That people are most are sticking with him who voted for him. Even though the poll numbers are at 40% in Gallup, he won with 46, so it's not that big of a drop. And even the Gallup poll is not even a likely voter screen. So I'm not convinced he's lost much of any of his initial support, maybe a little bit.
I think that's a smart. I think that's a smart thing to say, Bill, because I do think that those numbers are being overplayed by others who don't factor all those things in.
We need geographic distribution of those numbers. It was such a divide on Election Day. You can't just look at the national number and really get a sense of it. You got to know where that number is being distributed.
If people in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin love like the immigration ban or whatever, if they like Donald Trump, does anything else matter? Really? I mean, so
right. I guess I'm slightly surprised. I mean, I'm enormously surprised that people so quickly believe that so much has gotten done. Just because he had a travel ban that's tied up in the courts. He had a bunch of executive orders that were mostly words, not a lot of actual policy change, and you have lots of angry phone calls with foreign leaders. That's hardly getting stuff done. You might be optimistic where things might go, but why would you immediately conclude that the change is already happening?
I think we confuse accomplishment with action and activity, and it's been a flurry of activity, and it's been nonstop news and drama, and so it feels like we've aged a couple of years in the last month. So clearly he must be getting a lot of stuff done, right? I mean...
Now, with this activity, you're getting pushback from inside the government. We're just drowning in leaks. Some perhaps from the intelligence community, some perhaps from inside Trump's own team. Every day there's some revelation, either substantive or just embarrassing, that weighs down Trump and prompts him to respond angrily. And after what happened with Mike Flynn, where a whole lot of leaks came out to explain what was happening with the FBI investigating him and what he allegedly said to the Russians, prompting Trump to force his resignation or having Flynn resign himself. We've gotten two different stories from the White House itself. Mixed in with that is this charge that I think first level by Eli Lake, and I think echoed by Glenn Greenwald and others, that it is unnerving that the quote unquote deep state did this to Trump. That Trump angered the intelligence community, and now they're executing retribution. And even if you don't like Trump, that should scare you that the deep state has this devious power. Is that where you sit, Matt?
I am. I'm concerned about this, Bill. So look, I think that first of all, Trump is guilty of rank hypocrisy because he, invited the Russians to tell him what was in Hillary's emails, and he said he loved WikiLeaks and all that. So Trump's guilty of hypocrisy, and I think Trump wants to change the subject from like Flynn and Russia to leaks. And so, he may not have the purest motives. Having said that, I think it's entirely legitimate to have this discussion about leaks. I don't think it is healthy for there to be a sort of shadow government of intelligence operatives and Obama holdovers and bureaucrats who basically can selectively release information, highly sensitive, classified information, and use it to essentially take down somebody they don't like. It is the stuff of a police state. Now, there's a question about their motives. One man's whistleblower is another man's leaker. If you're somebody involved in government and you feel that something truly, truly bad is going on, and you think that the American public has a right to know, that's different in terms of motives than if you are seeking retribution because you don't like Mike Flynn, or you don't like the fact that Donald Trump has criticized your industry. So, long story short, I don't think that this story should be used to change the subject from the substantive concerns about Flynn, but I also don't think we should ignore it. I mean, do we want an America where there's like a fourth branch of government, these entrenched intelligence operatives who can really pull the strings and take down duly elected people and nominees and White House aides? I mean, it's something that does concern me.
Well, let me take the opposite view here. We talk about the deep state like it's a shadow government, but these are civil servants. These are government workers. They work on behalf of the people. They don't. They're not fireable by the president. They weren't hired by the president. Not fireable by the president. There's two different views of how government should function. This actually was a Heritage Foundation paper back in the early Bush days in 2001, which kind of derided the notion of a career civil service as being this technocratic progressive model of government that should be rejected because it could bring resistance to whatever conservative policies you want to execute. We moved to that model because what preceded was the spoil system, where you get all your people in there, but they weren't necessarily competent at their jobs, and government didn't work very effectively. So because these people don't directly answer to the president or the president's appointees, they have to uphold the law and the Constitution. So I would not look at this particular case as political payback. What we know has transpired based on what I've read in the Washington Post and other places, you have surveillance, always tracking what communications go through Russian the embassy, and picked up the Flynn conversation through that, heard something which was a violation of the law, private citizen negotiating policy with the foreign government, went through proper channels, told the Justice Department. The Justice Department, then headed by Sally Yates, an Obama holdover but acting AG, first took it to the White House counsel, not to the press. And when the White House, and according to the Washington Post, we don't know what the White House counsel did with it. That was a few weeks ago. That was in the first few days of the Trump presidency. It was only after these bureaucrats saw, hey, these guys have been told of a law violation, they're doing nothing about it. Then they took the step of being whistleblowers and letting the public know. I mean, that to me, that's classic whistleblowing, not political games.
I want to get back to that in a sec, but I do want to read something you said early on when you were sort of defending the civil service versus the old spoil system. There was a piece a few weeks ago by a guy named Philip Howard in the Wall Street Journal that makes a compelling or interesting argument. I'm going to read a little bit of it here. Mr. Trump can repudiate civil service in its current form as a violation of the Constitution's mandate that the executive power shall be vested in a president. Because of civil service laws passed by Congress many years ago, the president has direct authority over a mere 2% of the federal workforce. The question is whether those laws are constitutional. Does Congress have the power to tell the president that he cannot terminate inept or insubordinate employees? The answer, I believe, is self-evident. A determined president could replace the civil service system on his own by executive order. He goes into it more, but you could read that in the Wall Street Journal. So that's an interesting, provocative argument, obviously.
And I think there are a number of conservatives that believe that, who see the bureaucracy as being fundamentally opposed to conservative ideas and slow walk them and bury them, and therefore conservatives don't get to govern effectively. But if you don't have a meritocracy for the civil service that has independence, how do you trust the unemployment rate number when it comes out from the Bureau of Labor Statistics? How do you trust the GDP number when it comes out from the Commerce Department? How do you trust that when someone in the White House is breaking the law, that someone's going to be able to call attention to that?
Right. Because they're all legitimate,
and let the public know.
All legitimate points, Bill, but they're not, the founders have these separations of power and checks and balances, but that's not one of them. I mean, having that's developed into a role that it certainly plays, but that was not part of, that was not envisioned as a constitution as fulfilling that role as sort of a check on fake news coming out of or fake information coming out of the administration. And look, here's the problem: it's not just conservatives. Any change agent, if the American public wants change, and they go to the polls to express their desire for change, and they vote for a new president and new congressmen, and then they have people who are unelected bureaucrats in Washington who are taking it upon themselves to decide really to break the law and to leak information to the press. I don't know. It just, something about it is worrisome to me. I do see the other side of it as well, because let's just do a thought experiment and imagine what would happen if Trump, a guy who claims all sorts of fake things, could all of a sudden claim that the unemployment rate was 2%, right? I mean, if he were in charge of that number.
Right. And look, plenty of people on the left are not happy that there, at least, we don't know exactly what happened here, but there has been reporting that some FBI agents, had it in for Clinton and used their power in a political way to tip the election to Trump. So, it's power that can be abused if you are in the government, but. And you certainly want to try to guard against abuses of power. But I think an example where the abuse of power was spotted by someone in the bureaucracy and went to the public to let them know that it was happening because the proper channels weren't taking care of business, that to me is the system working, not the system breaking down.
But to me, look, if you're in the military, you don't get to decide. I know that this isn't a perfect analogy. You don't get to decide, like, which information you can leak. You know, you are under a hierarchy, you have code, you have laws, you have regulations to follow. You can personally disagree with those, but you obey the law and the chain of command. I would make a similar example here. Now, is there a time when something is so bad that that civil disobedience is yes, of course there is that time. I'm not seeing it here, right? So the New York Times had this information leaked to them and other outlets, but what they're reporting is that there's, let's take the latest story, right? The latest story was that the Trump administration, Paul Manafort and Mike Flynn specifically, were in communication with Russia during the campaign, not the transition, during the campaign. This goes against things that Mike Pence and Sean Spicer both said publicly. But the New York Times reported, as of the latest report, that there is zero evidence to suggest that the Trump administration was coordinating with Russia on the Hillary Clinton, leaked emails. So I don't see evidence that there was something so egregious, that so important, that that would sort of override or supersede your responsibility to keep things quiet and confidential and classified and to follow the law.
Well, if the Trump White House and Trump himself thought, hey, Mike Flynn's getting smeared here by people in the intelligence community that want political payback, well, I'm going to stand up to that. I'm going to stand up for Mike Flynn. I'm going to let the world know that he didn't break the law. This is a hit job. Of course, he didn't do that. He said they got him. They got him dead to rights. So I got to cut him loose. And then, of course, he then backtracked and said he was a good guy and went up against the intelligence committee after he dropped the axe himself, supposedly. But let me segue to a piece you just wrote for the Daily Beast about not just Flynn, but Kellyanne Conway and Sean Spicer, that here are people who had better reputations before they hooked up with Trump, and now I've seen them become turned into laughingstocks in some cases, and Flynn, losing his job, and perhaps Spicer and Conway could even be next. And I think even through Pence in there, someone who's got to watch his back, that Trump is a black hole of corruption that could taint everything around him. If I'm not over sensationalizing your argument.
Well, it just seems like there are a couple types of people who come around Trump. There are people who were like true believers in Trumpian nationalism from day one, and they tend to fare better because they were already sort of on the fringes. And he has just elevated them. They're still fringy, but he's just elevated their status and stature. So
Steve Bannon, Stephen Miller.
Yeah, right. So maybe that's a win for them. But the people who are in danger are people who sort of had credibility and were respected, and they lent that credibility and respect to Trump. So like in the case of Mike Pence, I think he serves a really vital role as someone who calms mainstream conservatives and also the mainstream press. This is a guy at least they know. And Pence goes out and softens Trump's message and can vouch for things, because he had credibility. He could go out and vouch and be like, this did not happen. Let me explain it to you. So like an explainer-in-chief type position. Well, it's been shown now on two different occasions that he has either lied or has been out of the loop. I think he's out of the loop. But on the case of the Trump people he said that the Trump people were not talking to Russia during the campaign. That turned out to have been false. And he said that Flynn was not talking to Russia about sanctions, and that appears to have been false as well. The good news for Mike Pence is he has plausible deniability. Like I think if the Trump administration were to go down, Pence has probably still preserved his reputation as like a guy who was just out of the loop. But I'm still not sure that's a great look for a vice president to have been out of the loop. You know, it doesn't instill a lot of confidence in his. It's not a good look. So the problem is the next time Mike Pence goes on TV and he says, "Take my word for it, such and such didn't happen," like, why would we believe him? Like, we might be like, okay, I don't think you're lying to me. I just think you may not really know. So he was an asset to the campaign and to the administration as a communicator, and I think that's been diminished. But yeah, it seems like a lot of these people, let's look at Kellyanne Conway as an example. Look, I'm not saying that she was, beloved by everybody. She's always been kind of, a right-wing, fiery, conservative pundit. But when she joined the Trump campaign, I and a lot of other people were saying, like, wow, there was a couple of weeks there where it seemed, maybe even a month, where she helped right that ship and get him back on track, and he seemed to soften a little bit. He seemed to stop tweeting as much, stop doing as much crazy stuff. And Kellyanne would go on TV and be a really good, effective communicator. And in some cases that involved dissembling or parrying questions. But spin is what you can't blame a spinmeister for being good at spin. I mean, George Stephanopoulos was good at spin. That's what these people do. But at some point, it occurred to me that she became Katrina Pearson. She went from being kind of like a grade A communicator who was, to like someone who's really obviously defending the indefensible and either lying to us or out of the loop. And in some cases, I think it actually might be both. So that's what this piece was about. And so for some reason, it is taken off, Bill, pretty good. I got a tweet. Anne Rice tweeted it. So that's
hey. You're in literary circles. You're like Dorothy Parker.
That's right. And I saw that you were while we were spreading the love. Deborah Messing retweeted Bill Scher.
It's true.
My generation's Lucille Ball, if I say so myself. So that's quite good company.
This is an A-list podcast right here, at least A-list through 2 degrees of Twitter.
What kind of name dropping is that to talk about who tweeted you or retweeted you?
The best kind. The absolute best.
Only the best. The best people. The classiest people. So. I'm sorry, but let me just say real quick. The obvious example of this was Chris Christie, right? I mean, who totally sucked up, and Ted Cruz too, but Chris Christie especially, who totally sucked up to Donald Trump, took out Marco Rubio in that infamous New Hampshire debate, and then Trump tells him, get the hell on the plane and get out of here,
Wait, don't we think Chris Christie is set up to be part of, Trump White House season 2? Isn't that the whole plan?
He could be. Matt Bai at Yahoo, I think it is, has a piece, he could be on the second string. Yeah, it's possible.
We had a little conversation. Well, I don't want to get ahead of a piece you might be writing, so I won't talk about it yet. But get back to your point about Pence. Being a VP who's out of the loop, I think, is the best he's going to do. George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush played. I was out of the loop on Iran-Contra and became president. Calvin Coolidge was out of the loop on Teapot Dome, and he was seen as cleaning house after Harding died. So, if I'm Pence keep me away. Don't include me in your meetings.
I mean, at this point, I think at this point, if I'm Pence, I don't want to be in the loop. Just stay in the old executive office building, hunker down over there. You don't want to know what's going on at this point.
But what's tricky for him is, as you mentioned, I mean, he actually plays a very important role for Trump. He needs Pence to be that liaison to Congress and actually get things passed, to the extent that Trump actually cares about getting things passed. Maybe I'm overestimating Trump's interest here, but he certainly helped keep the socially conservative right in line for the election. He's not a potted plant. And back in Coolidge's day, when there was a nominee that was a close vote, and people thought the vice president's vote was going to be needed, Charles Dawes. Actually, they thought they had the votes in hand, and Charles Dawes took a nap, and then they realized he needed his vote, and they woke him up, and he got to the Senate too late. Vote flipped, and he was mocked forever as it was Charles Dawes' Midnight Ride was the poem that was then crafted because he had a relative that was with Paul Revere, I believe, back in the Revolutionary days.
And this is a good time for me to go back on my get back on my high horse about the fact that there was a teenage girl who rode twice as far, Sybil Ludington.
Yes.
Who rode twice as far at night to call out her father's militia. Not a poem written about her. I wonder why. Bill, let me just make a point here.
Yeah.
One of us needs to. This is a column. This is a column that Mike Pence's plausible deniability, and you can use Coolidge and HW 41 as examples, like the advice to Mike Pence. Stay in the dark. Like you don't want to know. Like at this point, like ignorance is bliss.
I should write that column. It's a good idea.
You should get. If you don't do it, I'm going to do it. You should.
Well, let me ask you.
Mainly your idea.
In Washington, conservative circles, Republican circles, how many people are quietly rubbing their hands together, rocking back and forth and saying, President Pence, President Pence, President Pence? Oh. How many people think that they could actually engineer the impeachment or resignation of Donald Trump and get President Pence before 2020?
I don't think anybody would try that. That's so high risk, and that would if you were a conservative who was seen to be part of an effort to do that. That would be bad. The collateral damage is unpredictable. The unintended consequences, the damage it could do to the brand, so nobody would certainly nobody would lead a public effort to do that. However, if you were to go, let's not confuse the rank and file grassroots Joe Sixpack who loves Trump, with the conservative movement leaders. But if you were to go to and you're talking about Washington, they would love nothing more than Mike Pence to end up being president. Maybe it's just that Trump doesn't run for re-election, or that he resigns. Just like, hey, I've had enough, people. This was fun while it lasted. That Trump doesn't want the job anymore. Whatever it is, they would all, not all. But if you were to go to, let's just say, like Grover Norquist has a Wednesday meeting, every Wednesday morning, and if you were to go there and conduct a secret ballot, I think Pence would win over Trump, 80-20 probably.
When I'm here in Northampton, Massachusetts, one of the bluest dots in the country, I feel almost every conversation I have with people usually is, how long do you give Trump? 6 months? A year? How long can this guy last? People assume that he's going to be so scandal-tarred and or he'll get so sick of it that he'll quit. So people already.
But we've been so wrong about him so long. That's the thing.
I'm not saying
he wasn't going to run.
I'm not saying that's Ryan personally. My general attitude is House Republicans would never impeach unless Trump was just scraping such rock bottom that even his numbers were bad in their home conservative districts. That's the only way it would be politically possible for them to do it without getting primaried. Well, my question to you is: do people in the most gentle, idle chatter suggests, hey, maybe this could happen. Maybe.
Yeah, totally. I mean, these are people like me. Like, these are the people who were considered like never Trumpers, who are conservatives. Yeah, it's definitely talked about. Here's the thing I would say, Bill. I think Trump is much more tenuous than people realize. Because, and I said this on CNN the other night, and I think it's true. So right now we're seeing the Senate already. Let me start with this. There's always a sense when someone's at their peak power that there's a fear that you have of crossing them. But then there's a couple of chinks in their armor, and that emboldens people. Well, that's happened pretty quickly. We're starting to see that you can vote against Trump's nominee or whatever and get away with it, and he's too busy now fighting off all this stuff. There's also a thing where for a long time, he was feeding the media constantly, and it was a feeding frenzy of his choosing. He was keeping them busy. Now he's reacting. Information could come out. I mean, I was decrying these leaks earlier, but some of these, what if there are tapes of Trump? What if, and it doesn't have to be the Russian dossier, but what if there are emails or tapes that are leaked? Proof of him. Could be very different situation. It's different when you're president. It's different than when you're campaigning with like the Access Hollywood video. The problem that Trump has is that, Republican politicians and conservative opinion leaders do not have any personal affection or loyalty for him, or even professional loyalty to him, the way that you would have any other Republican president. His leadership is not transformational, it is transactional. And what that means is, I support Trump because I'm going to get Neil Gorsuch as a Supreme Court pick. Or I support Trump because my base likes Trump. Well, we're seeing attrition now in the Senate, right? Where he's not as popular in the Senate because they have 6-year terms. The lagging indicator is the House, right? The House seems to be sticking with him much more because they're up every 2 years and his base is their base and he's more popular than they are. I'm just saying, it's like the Malcolm Gladwell tipping point thing. That like, if this thing snowballs and comes undone, I think it could happen very quickly. Like, quicker than we would think. Who knows? Like, maybe this guy served for 8 years and is on Mount Rush. This is the matometer. The matometer is a very fickle device.
So where are you right now? Are we at Reagan, Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, Harding, Mussolini? Where are we right now?
I mean, if I had to pick among those, I think Harding.
Okay.
Today, yeah. That's how I'm feeling.
So we talked a lot about divisions on the right here. Before we go, I want to talk about divisions on the left. I had a piece at Real Clear Politics making the case that the left should leave Joe Manchin alone. Joe Manchin, who's the Democratic senator from West Virginia, former governor. He has voted for Jeff Sessions for Attorney General and Steve Mnuchin for Treasury Secretary. So those votes are rankling some on the left, particularly the Sessions vote. After that, you had the official Twitter feed of the Women's March say, "We vote no on Manchin." You had Sally Cohn, who I think she's still at CNN, a pundit there, saying, "I'm tempted to pack up my family and drive to West Virginia and spend the next 23 months trying to get rid of him." That
might not be a good move.
Well, I mean, I'm.
If you do it, Sally, go to Shepherdstown. That's where you should hang.
Well, I saw a poll a year ago from Public Policy Polling, which had Manchin up by 10 over a possible opponent, but below 50. But they asked the ideology of the voter pool, and it was about 25% liberal. I mean, it's not like liberals don't exist in West Virginia, but obviously not nearly in strong enough numbers. I mean, this is Trump's best state, period. 68.6%. Everyone else in that congressional delegation is Republican. There are no other close races. There's certain people who are sort of clinging to the West Virginia of not too long ago, which had 2 Democratic senators, Democratic congresspeople, voted for Mike Dukakis for president.
West Virginia was maybe the most reliable Democratic state, actually, for decades.
But there's been a very abrupt shift. It's not anywhere near a blue state now. It does have a Democratic governor, although it's the state's wealthiest person.
Yeah, he owns the Greenbrier Resort.
Right,
and
also has coal interest as well. That's the thing. The Democratic Party.
Greenbrier? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I think that's right. That's right. But the Democratic Party is an environmentalist party. There's no splitting the difference there anymore. And you're not going to get very far in West Virginia being for the EPA and being for climate change regulation. That's just not going to happen. Manchin isn't for that and takes other conservative positions on certain things. And that is the best you're going to get in West Virginia right now. The fact that any seat in West Virginia is Democrat is a gift to Democrats. And if you're trying to resist Trump as best as possible, you want to have as good a 2018 as possible. On one hand, the map is terrible for Democrats. There are literally 10 red state Democrats up for re-election in 2018. But if Trump's numbers keep sinking further, you might pick up a few Republican seats. You only have to pick up 3 to take control of the Senate, and you certainly don't want to give up a seat that you have. So making Manchin's life more difficult and depressing whatever liberal base is there, or attacking Manchin as being a tool of Wall Street because he voted for Mnuchin, that's not going to help with the resistance. And I get that Democrats can have a bolder, more progressive message than they could pre-Obama. Obama proved what was possible with a more resolutely liberal message. And even Hillary Clinton, with Stronger Together, won more votes than Trump. It's not like it's a terrible message. But I think there's a lot of space between having a Republican light strategy for the Democrats and being all left all the time for everybody. You can have a little bit of tolerance for different opinions when you're playing on a congressional map that by design is tilted towards rural America. Just because Manchin votes for Sessions doesn't mean that the entire Democratic message on civil rights and voting rights has been completely sullied. It's one vote. Let the guy have his vote. If he's going to hold that turf for Democrats, there's a difference between him and Zell Miller. If you remember Zell Miller, who was in the 90s a rock-ribbed Democrat, but in the Bush years, once he became senator for Georgia, literally wrote a book attacking the entire National Party and endorsed George W. Bush in 2004 and accused John Kerry of outsourcing our national security to the UN and to Paris. That's a bad Democrat. That's a Democrat who has no value to the party anymore. Manchin does nothing like that. Manchin is in the Senate leadership. He does not undercut National Democrats as being toxic. But he picks his spots, and that's you gotta let senators pick their spots and trust that they know their own states better than you do. If you're an outside the state progressive activist, so I just don't think it makes any sense at all to start to go out of your way to have a circular firing squad in 2018 when you have when you want to be trying to maximize your gains for 2018.
I completely agree. If I were advising Democrats or progressives, I would say don't let Joe Manchin do whatever Joe Manchin needs to do. You gotta different standards for different states. You cannot expect a Republican from Connecticut to vote the way a Republican from Alabama will. You have to have different standards, and
I've heard folks say, I sort of get why Joe Manchin voted for Sessions, but Mnuchin, this is clearly an economic populist state. They have no love for Wall Street. Why would you vote for the Goldman Sachs guy? Quite frankly, I get that argument. if I was Manchin, I might pick my spot in a different spot. But I'm not Manchin. I haven't won statewide in West Virginia for the last 16 years. So if he has some reason why he thinks that's a decent choice, I mean, I can have a tactical disagreement with the guy and not primary him and just say, well, I don't get why he did that, but you do you, and do your best to hold that seat for us.
I don't know if you saw Jim Webb was on Face the Nation or one of those Sunday shows this week. I mean, that kind of guy. In fact, I thought Trump should have seriously considered picking Jim Webb as his running mate, because I thought then he could win Pennsylvania and Ohio. Apparently, he didn't need to go as radical as I thought he did.
Still went Midwest though.
He did. But
in 2006, lots of people on the left loved Jim Webb and loved John Tester of Montana. I mean, there was a real momentum driven by the Netroots left away from ideological purity tests. Say, look, Jim Webb isn't going to agree to everything, but he's going to fight. He's going to fight hard. He's going to fight George Bush, and he's the best we're going to do in Virginia, and he's worth our support. And same with Tester at Montana, and those guys wanted people were really happy about it. Now, I think Jim Webb did not make good sense for Democrats as a presidential candidate, and he sort of played up his conservative streak a lot more in that ill-fated race than he did in 2006. But the point still stands. There's been a change. I shouldn't overstate this yet, because let's see if challenges actually manifest. But I think there's definitely a change in attitude on some on the left who are who are embracing Democrats from different ideological perspectives, with the common theme of at least you fight hard for the party. And now you're seeing those ideological purity tests becoming more prominent. Again, I don't know if it's going to go as far as actually primarying people, but it seems to be a particularly bad time to push the purity test line when you're trying to unify an anti-Trump opposition.
Indeed. All right, people. Follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. You can listen to this as an audio podcast. You have to search for Blogging Heads at iTunes, but you can listen to all the Blogging Head shows on audio when you go out for a run or you're on the subway, or you could there's a DMZ show that you can find if you search Blogging Heads. Read Bill's piece. That was Real Clear Politics, right, about Manchin?
That's right.
Check out my stuff at the Daily Beast, where I am getting tweeted by vampire authors as we speak.
Yeah, I need to figure out if we can get the podcast on my Amazon Echo. I haven't tested that yet. I will do my research and let folks know if we're available there.
Soon the world will know that you are available there, and Mr. Trump will not be denied. What else? Be careful with that Amazon Echo, right? People are accidentally their kids are ordering stuff.
That doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen, never happens. Maybe that's more fake news.
You can do your settings so that doesn't happen.
Okay. Do that. Do those settings. I think that's it, guys.
All right.
Another award-winning episode of the DMZ Show, and
another week we've survived in Trump's America. We'll see if we can make it to next week.
It's been like 2 or 3 years, it feels like, but it's less than a month. So, all right. See you guys.
Take care.
Thanks.